a little more of where we were regarding the matter of acts and facts, and also how facts, man's reason for what he does, always follows the need for him having did what he did. Two new outshoots from that into the great world of six-dimensional physics. Firstly, is that no one knows the facts until there have been some acts. The second one is, now remember that, some of you already got some, but now, in this other world, the second one is, no one knows the acts until they've heard the facts. Thank God I said 6D, because in the 3D world, we'd now be, I'm sure, dodging tomatoes and rotten fruit. Or else, I'm afraid, from the crowd, somebody might have hurled a small philosopher even. Some of us can even dodge rotten fruit, but to have a small philosopher, what do you call somebody that teaches logic? Logician? Hurled at the stage can be dangerous. All right, the first one is no one knows the facts until there have been some acts. Now, this is simply because there are no facts until some act has taken place. And this based upon, I don't even know whether I should call this a law, because it is so far removed from the operations of the human nervous system that I'm not even sure you'll be surprised. I'm not even sure you'll hear it. I'm not sure of anything. What planet are we on? No one knows the facts until there have been some acts, because there are no facts until some acts have taken place. Now, the part I was going to add to that is this, is that men do not invent facts. Acts do. Should we even deal with that? If there had been any sort of hint, any sort of suggestion, at least based upon the kind of stuff we've been talking about, I would go ahead and speak for some ordinary intelligence of some audience and say, well, if you're going to talk about facts, the human nervous system, the part of the human nervous system that talks, the brain in some way does come up with interpretations, it comes up with reasons. It is even behind, believe it or not, that great physical pastime of hand gestures. I saw a lion one time that did hand gestures, but you don't want to hear about it. And so you might think, if I was speaking for ordinary intelligence, that, all right, facts are something other than acts. There's some difference between a mountain, if a mountain is an act. And who's to say it's not? You go tell it if you think so. If a mountain's sitting there, that's the mountain act. And then you might have said, if you're ordinary intelligence, then based upon the kind of stuff we've been noodling around about, then, all right, even the name, the mountain, if we're going to call that a fact as opposed to an act, the mountain itself, the existence of the mountain being an act, then the human intelligence then makes up, whether it has any correlation, whether it's good, bad, or whatever, the human intellect says, all right, we got to call that something. And they debated, popsicle, mother-in-law, and they decided mountain sounds right. And so you could then say, all right, it's now a mountain. That's the fact. That's the word. But it's separate. Now, they might have said something along those lines if it had any warning that I was about to step into this. But now all of you have sharpened your minds to such a degree that surely you can hear. There are no facts. That's no conditions in there, please hear. There are no facts until there's some acts. But men do not invent facts. Acts do. Oh, all right, if you insist. Not always we can. Hell with it. Secondly, going to the other one. No one knows the acts until they hear the facts. Well, now, even I can speak well enough for what should be a sane, ordinary person and point out that those two, so-called rules of six-dimensional physics are mutually exclusive. And even though either one of them, in some places, either one of them, is insane and illogical, it's even worse to try and foster both of them off on us, the honest, logical, unsuspecting public. And so one of them being illogical by itself, either one, being illogical by itself, then to try and present both of them as being true, speaking again for good intelligence, what would you even call that? To issue what you claim to be some law of physics that is irrational, and at the same time say that the corollary of it is, and it sounds to be the opposite. What's the opposite of irrational? And I had a nice prize for whoever. I'll be damned. I'll just drink it. I'll just use it myself. Let me back over it then. Let me try it again. 2 new laws of physics. Laws. I'm not even going to put around and say that they're suggestions. These are laws. First one is that there are no facts without acts. No one knows any facts until they're acts. Number 2, there are no acts until someone has heard the facts. Don't shake your head. All right. All right, the first one we've already covered. We got that nailed down. But now on to the second one. I just wanted to remind you of how this is in some way, even beyond us coming up with any attempted description, it is the opposite of the irrational to start with. That sounds too mealy-mouthed. It's the opposite of the impossible. Screw the irrational, that's for sissies. Real men, real soldiers of the cranium, they wouldn't even deal with saying something's irrational. They'd say it's impossible. And if it's not, shoot it. So, it's not just irrational. What's the opposite of the impossible? See, I even had a bigger prize. So we're on to the second one. That's where the opposite of the impossible is, since all of you understand, even though it is impossible, that there are no facts until they're acts, and that men do not invent facts, acts do. Now on to number 2, the opposite of that impossibility, that there are no acts until someone has heard the facts. I'll grant you this much, as I'm sure all of you have already figured out. At some primary level, this is not necessary. The law is still in effect. If you want to parallel in the same way that just because you don't have a car, or just because they repossessed your car, they did not repossess the speed limit. The speed limit's still in effect even if you do not have a means of transportation driven by an internal combustion engine. This law is still in effect even if it was having to do with primary activities which are not dependent upon, which are not in a very precise way even tied to a matter of facts. But there are no facts now in the world, not the primary world, but now in the everyday, ordinary, secondary world of intelligent, speaking man. There are no acts until someone has heard the facts. That is, until you have heard the facts about this act, either from apparently someone out there or from yourself. Until you have heard the facts, there are no acts. It's not possible. Okay. That is, don't choke yet. That is, that in the secondary, the world in which man thinks, it is not possible in any way, it is not possible for the intellect to deal with what must be isolated facts. To do anything, you have got to be able to turn the attention, which you do without thinking, which you do with no effort, that you turn around and you deal in episodic consciousness. You deal in sentences with objects, verbs, nouns, verbs, noun, and object. To do that, You have got to isolate, in the sense we talked about before. You've got to take the seamlessness, whatever the hell that is, the seamlessness of reality. Everything all put together at one time and put into Montana, and then you blow away the state lines of Montana and no one notices. And so it's all there. But to deal with it, for it to become part of man's intellectual world, you have got to be able to isolate. You've got to turn around and look at something and not look at everything. You can't see everything, or else you can't see anything. You cannot see that there are 3 and perhaps even more flavors. If so, you couldn't even order chocolate or vanilla as God intended. Much less you throw in strawberry. That's already people are going to starve. I mean, they're going to stand there and they don't know what to do. But if you said, if they could go, wait a minute, 3, I can't deal with that. And if you said, well, Jesus, have I got a bit of bad news for you? Because 3 is not even the limit. That was it. You have got to be able to isolate. It's nothing funny, nothing mystical. It's right here. You can see it yourself. For this thing to operate at its ordinary, necessary, everyday level, you have, although I'm making up the term, or applying the word here, you have got to be able to isolate something. It is sometimes just referred to with ordinary people as you have to be, your consciousness has to be focused somewhere. I mean, if you're just going to stand around, you're like some kind of vacant kind of eyes and your head like the little dog in the back of the window in the car. People are not going to probably come to you and seek advice on brain surgery or their investments. Just for the intellect to operate in a way like, your girlfriend or your boyfriend says, "Hey, what's on TV tonight?" You pick up TV Guide, and there it is. Let's say, here it is. You look, it's got every page for the week, and it's got every possible channel. It's even got cable channels. You don't have cable. It's got satellite channels. It's got 100 channels. Maybe all you got is a little black and white set that picks up 2 or 3 channels. And so all the information that you could possibly want about what's on TV that night, more than you'll ever be able to pick up, is right there. But you won't even know that much if it was... In other words, if your mind in some way, if intelligence just looked down and in some way it could do this, which in a sense it can, but you don't know it, that it can actually pick up TV Guide and be aware that, who knows, if it's 100 channels on and it's 7 days a week, don't make me try to figure it out in my head. Let's say there are thousands of possibilities. They're in this week's TV Guide. But what good's that going to do? I mean, what are you going to do with that if you're trying to watch TV? Or you're just trying to respond to someone saying, "Hey, what's on right now? It's 8:30, what's on?" I mean, you simply can't do that. You have to go, all right. You have to focus down. You have to look, all right, Tuesday, right? Yeah, Tuesday, all right. 8:30, you say, 8:30, right. 8:30. All right, is the ones that it shows here in Nice City, is that the ones that are colored in red? And they say, yeah. You say, okay. And then you start telling them what's on. You have to be able to isolate something. For someone to say, is this where we turn if you're driving the car? You have to look up. You have to be able to look and see what the street sign. It is simply the way polarized intelligence works. You have to be able to, in the way in which many times we talk about, artificially isolate every possible thing going on within your intellectual purview. And you have to focus somewhere to see what the street sign is. To see if they change the speed limit. Since the school zone where you were, whether you can pick back up the speed limit, you have to look at the sign to think of anything. So there is this sort of, as we sometimes call it for our own purposes, a kind of artificial, arbitrary isolation that the intellect must do at the ordinary level. You must do it all the way from finding out what in the hell's on TV to doing that from trying to sit there and make some sense out of Einstein's special theory. All of it, you've got to be able to isolate what is going on here and focus it. Now back to the second new rule of 6D funny physics, the opposite of the initial impossible one, recall. But this one is there are no acts until you've heard the facts. Now, the acts, of course, now I mean, we're not talking about an occurrence. We're not talking about the act of a wildebeest tripping and a lion looking at it and thinking, maybe I am hungry after all. Maybe I could, eat another bite. We're not talking about worms sitting around and suddenly some Italian worms, and Mount Vesuvius begins to percolate. We're not talking about occurrences. I am now using acts in this realm regarding the matter of acts and facts. Acts are not occurrences. Acts are something, as you should know, or we'd be talking about, that are singular to the secondary world. Now, they may coincide. There's no doubt that if you're staying there and somebody says, I hate to say this, but I think that damn volcano just, exploded. And you turn around and you say, by God, that's a fact. All right. In this case, the fact may coincide with the occurrence, but they are not the same thing, see. The worms, they may be aware, they may feel the heat that the lava starts to, and so the occurrence has some significance. But the eruption of the volcano there, as far as the worms or the trees are concerned, is not a fact. It's just an occurrence. It's only a fact if it can be thought about. Now, consider again, all of you who thought the second rule was even nuttier than the first one. That's what a lot of people, logisticians, somebody look up. It's hell, I can't remember. I almost had a job teaching it once. Just a little joke. There are no acts, not occurrences. The world does whatever it does, in addition to, outside of, including whatever men think about it. Get out of that one. So beyond that, they're facts, and those are singular. To man. If you do not have a talking, functioning intellect, there are no such things as facts. There's life, there's occurrences, and whatever, but there are no facts. So, but now consider then, in that sense, it is not as crazy as some of you thought. There can be no acts until you've heard the facts from somewhere. So that's the best I get, eh? I've been to cheap churches that didn't even have any heat or air conditioning, where the amen corner could do better than that. Of course, they are operating on a different kind of fuel, and if you're a good preacher, know what you're doing, you just kind of look around, or you've got somebody like a brother-in-law or somebody owes you money. If the rest of the congregation won't really play along, at least every now and then you glance at him, he'll go, "Amen, amen, thank you, Jesus," or some crap. See, since we don't have anybody in my personal debt here, it's hard. In other words, we're operating on the basis that not as a good Baptist or Catholic or Jew, God forbid. So you people don't react unless you feel it. What if the rest of life was on that basis? Amen, brother. You stopped it all in some way. Wait a minute. If your nervous system, at least on the basic limbic level, does not feel it, don't do it. And you got all the audiences in the world, all the congregations, all the people in the world, but everybody plays audience to somebody, and say, all right, from now on, don't applaud, don't react, don't smile, don't dance, don't even offer to dance unless you mean it, unless you feel it. Did that look give? You understand what that would mean? That'd be the end of the little ballroom. So at any rate, back to what we were talking about. Until you have heard about the facts, there are no such things as acts. If there's any other need, I can make it very crudely. Just think about, just at the ordinary, what you've already read back in high school or undergraduate classes in psychology, or just thought about. Just what appears to be the education, the ordinary learning cycle of little nippers. Just think about it. I mean, as soon as I say it, you can surely hear it, whether you've had a little nipper of your own or not. They're a kid. You don't want them to touch the hot plate, or you got a floor heater, and you keep wanting to say something. Of course, there's some similarity with dogs. Except some of you, I'd hate for you to think that I was trying to compare your little nipper with a... They all look real nice. Everybody's got children. I didn't want you to think that I was insinuating that some of your little kids look like an uncouth pit bull. But anyway, even with a dog, but that's not the point. With kids, it's like, you understand, the fact doesn't exist. They can go over there and burn their hand, but as far as you're concerned, and as far as they're concerned, if you look at it a certain way, the occurrence was there, that they might got burned, or there's even the occurrence that you know they could get burned, but it does not exist as a fact until their intellect gets to the point that you can say, don't, or hot. The words are not important at that point, any more than is a dog. No, a dog doesn't know food. When you say, food, food, the dog doesn't have some picture in his mind of, big old chunks. I hate to surprise some of you. Of course, I'm going to get apologetic and concerned about your intellectual welfare. I'll go ahead and say it. There seems to be a difference between that and then being grown up and educated, right? No. Now I know it. No, I know what food means. I'm not a dog, or I'm not a kid. I'm not just reacting. All you're insinuating is that some kind of just very mechanical, animalistic reaction to a sound. I mean, it's just some kind of association that after 2 or 3 times with a dog, you say food, and then you put down the food. And so he just knows the sound. That's all you're saying. There's a difference between that and me. I got damn near a college education. No comparison at all. I resent you even insinuating that. You mean, you just insinuate just the sound of something, like, instead of food, like love, sex, God. Watch it. Bastard. Ugly. Wait a minute. No, those things mean something. Those things are not just sounds I'm reacting to. You're right. They're what? The facts. I mean, not that it's true when somebody called me ugly. But now we're talking about a fact. We're not talking about just a sound. We're not talking about just a dog or just his blind reaction, or even a kid. That you can get them enough and you say hot, hot, or don't. And the kid, and like you finally got him for his own good. Don't. When he gets close to the heater, don't. And you push him back. Don't. Push him back. And pretty soon he's as smart as a dog hearing food. That a dog hears the sound food and the dog runs to you. The little nipper hears don't, and it goes away. If I may give a hint, one of the best things that slipped out, I did about 2 minutes ago. I didn't plan to do it, but it slipped out, any of you who were listening. There are no acts in any sense. This is not metaphysical. It is not symbolic. It is not metaphorical. It is not a parable. In the world of man, in anybody's intellect, there are no acts until you've heard the facts. Don't. Hot. Food does not exist. Now, the occurrence of it does, of eating, of getting hurt, of getting burned, but it is not a fact. I mean, it's not an act. It's an occurrence, but it is not an act until you've heard the facts. All right. All right, try it this way. I'm tired of being nice. If there were no facts, the secondary world, I was going to slip up and say one thing and make it gradual, but you people pushing your luck. So I'll combine them. Here it goes. Start all over. Run back the tape, or get your eraser, whatever you do, so that this looks real professional. Back to, all right, you people push your luck. See, I'll make it sound like... The secondary world of man Without facts, the secondary world of man would not be so serious, much less exist there. That was what I was talking around the edges of. Does that make it any clearer? Literally. It's not funny, it's not metaphysical, it's not metaphorical. If it were not for facts, and you can't have facts without acts. We've already been through that, and you can't have acts without facts. But were it not for facts, the secondary world would not exist. I wanted to get into it wouldn't be so serious, but as I said, you pushed me, so I put it all together into that more dramatic. Without facts, the secondary world of man would not be so serious, much less exist. So I guess we'll skip this first part for tonight. It just would not exist. You would have the occurrences going on. If we're going to play rubber reality and say everything else being the same, if we could do that, then if we took away facts in the great area regarding the matter of acts and facts, if we subtracted facts, you would not have a secondary world of man. There would be no singular world of man. If everything else remained equal and I could suddenly extract that, we would be at the same level as our betters, our peers, dogs, beavers and minks. The occurrences, everything else still, for this little picture, everything else still being equal. Still volcanoes, still worms, still changes in weather, still everything else. But you would not have in any way the secondary world of man. Not at all, unless there were facts. Facts. And remember, the acts, I said, can be the same as occurrences. Can be the same. So we haven't really affected that. So how come we couldn't have the secondary world? Why would you even say that? Why would you even verbally paint such a picture? In other words, still, everything else being just like it is, everything else would not be just like it is. But if everything else being just like it is, and you subtracted facts, everything else wouldn't be just like it is. Even if everything was still just like it is, you understand? Because you could have no secondary world. A volcano, clouds, rain, corn, dirt, worms. They're all still there. It's all still going on. But it would not be sufficient. The secondary world would not exist because all you would have would be acts. I wouldn't call it that then, but that's all you would have, would be acts. If you do not have facts, you do not have a secondary world. And to think, I stopped, tried to back up, running the risk, as always, of severe tire damage for this. But it's good that some of us have steel-belted brains, I guess. I guess I should try and change the temperature of the subject. But wink, wink. But let me just remind you of what we all missed, or what you missed. I didn't miss it, but since somebody always keeps trying to make me say made it up when I mean to say discovered. Who would make me do that? Remember these two new laws of six-dimensional physics, well, at least damn near 5D physics, for those of you that want to be very touchy about it. That first off, that no one knows the facts until there have been some acts. Now, you grasp that one so fast, I didn't say much about it, but because I guess even at a near 5D level that is just obvious. There can't be any facts until there are acts. Because we established last time we met, if you recall, we did it clinically through independent research and testing, that facts follow acts. That's just it. So, you should be able to see, trying to expand this into a more revealing, if not concealing, law that no one knows the facts until their acts. Number two is, no one knows the acts until they've heard the facts. Now we'll apparently change the humidity a little bit. What I was going to say, we're going to have to pretend that you either heard more of that than I thought you did, or else I have to pretend that I think you heard more than maybe you did. The responsibility of city man, secondary thinking man, is nowadays not only to act in that isolated primary description and sense of it, is not only to act, but today it's just as much his responsibility as to turn out facts. Because you've got to act to stay alive in that primary sense. The needs are inescapable. If you're just sane and ordinary and you're trying, your hormones are driving you to try and live, even past the point that Mutual of New York or Wausau says, he should have been dead by now. Of course, a lot they care since they don't have to pay off as long as you keep living. And so at the primary level, you're going to act. Everybody's going to act if you're part of the sane middle class, middle of the bell curve of life. You eat, screw, sleep, get out of the rain, so that tomorrow you can eat, sleep, screw, and get out of the rain. But that is no longer sufficient. That is not the job any longer. That is not the job description of contemporary man, because individually and especially collectively, because individually you can, here and there, people drop by the wayside, hermits, drunks, drug addicts, and all that. But collectively speaking, and that's why I say always a sane person, just an ordinary person. The purpose of the city now, the responsibility is no longer just to act. That is, just to engage in those occurrences that keep humanity going. As much now, the responsibility of secondary man, city life, is to turn out facts. Of course, I'm going to have to go ahead and think for somebody and talk and say, well, somebody, if they heard this, would have to go, wait a minute. Maybe that's some sort of poetic talk, turn out facts based upon what you just said. You mean some of you followed the first 30 minutes? Oh, that's right, I was talking for them. He gave me some hope there for a minute. Maybe that's it. I'll start listening. I'll listen to this and I'll go, yeah, all right, okay. Except what good would that do? I don't know. Make a note and we'll check on that later. If somebody was listening to this, then they could say, well, wait a minute. Turn out facts based upon what you've been talking about for the last 30 minutes. Of course, even if it didn't make any sense the last 30 minutes, you should already be able to think in such a way that if I say part of the responsibility now, as much as being able to act, as much as doing those kinds of primary acts to keep the organism of humanity going, it is now as much the responsibility of the secondary modern man to produce facts. Then I'll speak for this ordinary person. Say, well, wait a minute, you don't produce facts, because I've been listening for even the insanity you've been talking about for the last 30 minutes. Facts, in some way, you already point out that you said facts follow acts. That now he's going to try to put words in my mouth, but since I'm doing it, I'll go ahead. Because in a sense, I may be putting this crudely. Well, I can guarantee that. I may be putting this crudely, but by acts and facts, you're saying, in a sense, you're just talking about the difference between the mountain and the word for the mountain. Or food itself, something to eat, something that is nutritional, and then the word food. That's all you're saying. You're just between acts and facts. Well, I told you it might be crude. Yeah, and I told you I was expecting it. All right, but even if we did that, you can't say that man turns out facts like he just manufactures them. Well, who's going to stop me? Turn out facts. But if I was listening to me as closely as I pretended I was, I would have to say, well, I detected no rancor, no ripping off of flesh, known in the Western world as sarcasm. Turn out facts. Oh, wait a minute, all you're saying is humanity makes up names for things. The verbal symbol so that he can talk about stuff. Can't disagree with that. Well, that's not actually turning out stuff because the stuff was there. The mountain was there, and then man said, well, let's call this a mountain. Because you even said, well, facts follow acts. Explanations have got to follow existence. That's not incorrect. But I'm telling you, an inescapable part of modern life, and there are no exceptions, well, there's no exceptions in people that's ever going to hear this tape or would hear this. What few's left on this planet have no great consequence anymore. Everybody else's responsibility, the sane ones, is now in part, in good part, not only to act, that is to do those sane, self-fueling, self-preserving, beneficial, non-verbal acts, such as eating, screwing, sleeping, etc. Not only that, but it is now as much your responsibility, collectively, to turn out facts. And why would I stop and go through this several times, even playing your dumb part? I mean, somebody's dumb part. If it was simply a matter as that guy that I tried to play his part went, well, wait a minute, there's not that much. I guess there's a difference between the word eat and actually what you eat. But it's not. Now what's the purpose in saying if the word eat is facts compared to the act of eat? Okay, go ahead. Then why say that it's our responsibility to turn them out? Because we could eat without having a name for the word eat. That wouldn't stop us from eating. Okay. It would stop you from being intellectual. It would stop you from being modern man. Disappointed again. I thought I'd catch you. You want me to do it again? Ordinary intelligence. Oh, wait a minute. If I'm falling into this, it's beginning to get even too irrelevant, too ridiculous. Because you're saying that there is some importance beyond a word being reflective of the act itself. Because if it's true what I thought I heard you say, that it's now part of secondary, just everyday intellectual man, modern man's responsibility, collectively at least, to turn out, to produce facts. Then the facts, if what I heard you say is just facts in some way are like descriptions of acts already, just because we didn't have a word for food, we wouldn't go hungry, would we? No. Again, assuming that you're sane. Well, so we don't, even if we didn't have a fact, if the word eat is the fact, okay. But then the act is actually taking in nourishment. Okay. If we didn't have the word eat, that wouldn't stop me from eating. No. But it'd stop you from being a modern man. See, that's where I thought some of you'd go, ah! And you didn't. Well, some of you are too reticent with your emotions anyway. It would not only stop you from being, and I mean modern man in the full sense, it would stop you from being conscious. It would stop you from being intelligent. It would stop you from being part of the mainstream of life's nervous system. It would stop you from being what you are. You might certainly be there eating, staying alive, but you would no longer be you. You would no longer be part of the secondary world. It is not simply a matter. There's no other way. It cannot be proven or disproven in the polarized world, because, as you know, if somebody says, wait a minute, all you're talking about is chocolate, and I say, no, I'm not, no, I'm not, and force them to see that I'm not, then they say, oh, vanilla. And you say, nah, because the mind goes, well, don't say nah, because I went through a big struggle trying to listen to you put down chocolate. And now I got to the point to go, all right, I say it's vanilla, and you say it's not that. Hey, come on. It's either chocolate or vanilla. And I walked to you and tried to follow this far enough to go ahead and go, well, you're right. I can see the possibility it's not chocolate, at least all the time. I can see it could be, under certain conditions at least, it could be the appearance, if not the justifiable existence of vanilla. Boy, what a big... And then for somebody to say, nope, nope, a little bit further. They have a term for that. It's called FF. Like frig further. You know, there's no further. It's either chocolate or vanilla, and I knew damn well. And now that you got me upset, I still know damn well. But anyway, I was trying to go along with you with this kind of weird shit stuff. And I considered the possibility it could be vanilla. I mean, that was a quantum leap for me. Well, I don't know if that says anything about leaps and quantums or about your agility. Because that kind of leap is like shifting your weight from your left foot to your right foot. Yes, but it took me 30 years to do that. Maybe, but everybody needs a hobby. It is not simply what I am inferring. It is not simply that it's ordinary man's responsibility to put a name on everything. That's one way of putting it, but that's a childish way of putting it. If this kind of stuff had kindergarten, that'd be kindergarten. It's more than that. It's not only your responsibility, ordinary man, to act, but it's now his responsibility to turn out facts. Well, let's see if we can pretend to shift it a little bit. There has been, speaking of shifts, there has been, even as we have been alive, and before and after, there has been a kind of shift, but if it makes you feel any better, I could pretend that we can historically pinpoint it more in our day than the lost age of reason, or back when Erasmus was not so irascible. But there has been a kind of shift that's occurred in man's secondary world that has not been noted. What you have nowadays, you got to listen in a fairly certain way. To what you have got now is men, even what appears to be groups of men, nations, etc. You have got men now struggling more over facts than they do actual acts. They individually, but you can see it on a large level. You just can't be, if you're held just by ordinary the running of thought processes, you can immediately say no and miss it. But you have now contemporary, secondary, right in the city, right in the mainstream of life, men are now more driven to wrestle over, argue about facts. That is, the other party. If it was two people or it's two opposing countries or groups. Even if it's just for a second, they're apparently in some kind of momentary, or might go on for months or years, but some sort of potential. Ordinary people won't say hostilities, but let's say that yet no shots have been fired between the groups or between the two people. But they're obviously, if nothing more, two cats in the same yard, or two wolves, But it's not just acts, which is what two wolves kind of circling around about whose territory is this? Men start doing that, but nowadays, as opposed to it being dependent upon strictly tangible acts of physical aggression, there are now, don't miss it, they are now more driven. They are more inclined to be struggling over the facts. the other party, the other potential opponent, but the other party's explanations for what they think, for what they say, for what they dream, for their proposed acts. Not just acts they've done, but for their propositions of, well, says Group A, we would hope that someday you people, Group B, there could be two individuals, we hope that someday you people, Group B, come to your senses and adopt our political system, or adopt our God, see my way of life. Quit doing it. That's our dream. We only want what's best, not just for us, but everyone. What damage does that do if you're going to look at it, if you could do so in a non-sissy manner? Just look at it, so what? I mean, here I am, as God intended, living in North Dakota, and these people live in South Dakota. And they say they don't wish me any harm. They say that they don't really care if I stay over here. I can go through and start doing a little piece of business, but can any of you do this by yourself? I need to know how the nervous systems operate. Not through a psychological flaw, not through a physical or spiritual curse, but because of the transformation, the need to move about energy in the life of life, down in this great area known to us one and all as being alive. For those of you that think Pope John made that up, it was the Brothers Gibbs. But notice, they do not insist that you worship them, just that you buy some of the older albums. Staying alive, being alive. So the person in North Dakota feels a tension, potential danger. The North Dakotians will start to arm on the basis that those in South Dakota are saying, we wish you no harm, but someday we hope you come to your senses and step over the line there and come down here in South Dakota where things are really nice. No one has kidnapped you. No one is holding up a gun like if you don't come, we'll shoot you. It's their dream. They say, our dream is everyone be as happy as we are. And oh, we're so happy in South Dakota. It's so much warmer here than it is over in North Dakota. Why don't you come join us? And everybody in North Dakota begins to get very testy. Those that's not so cold that they no longer have any testosterone. See, there's some people in the medical profession that does not know that it's testosterone that produces testiness. Well, why is it only men are actively, or at least ranked at the level of the heavyweights in the boxing profession? Men are now, I repeat one more time, don't fall into just ordinary trap because people are out fighting right now. Their country is fighting in armed conflict. There are people outside this, within blocks here, probably some guy's beating up on his wife and she's waiting for him to go to bed so she can hit him. I know all that. They're actual acts of aggression. Those kind of acts. But notice, get past that. That's still going on. What is what would seem to be right now, if we could use a kind of oxymoron and say, what is contemporary history about? Even though I know there are people fighting right now, nations fighting, actively. If you look at contemporary times, if you can unfocus your own thinking in such a way as to get a little bit outside the margins of the Wall Street Journal or Time magazine and see, people are no longer, and it's a gradual process, but you surely, those of you who can see it all can see this or can hear it. Men are now, history, humanity, city life is no longer being driven on the basis as much as it was. So much so, of fighting over the acts that people do. There are now, and I won't say fight because then the parallel sounds like I'm really trying to insinuate fight. It's the struggle, the preparation to fight, the tension, the armaments, the discussions. How much time is taken up in the countries of the world, up until recently. But let's say between the USSR, between Western world and the Eastern world, the US and the USSR. They weren't in active combat directly for 40 years. But for 40 years, if you kept up with the news at all, if you just pick up the paper, just turn on TV once or twice a week, if you look through a paper once a week, if you turn on the news once a week for 30 minutes, somewhere, up until recently, there would be something about the Cold War, the conflict, the tension, the threat between USSR and U.S. Not a shot was fired directly between the two. But for 40 years, it was almost part of the driving dynamo in that kind of dynamics and that dance. It's not the only one on this planet, but that was the preeminent dance, was between those two countries. And what was it? Well, you say, well, it was the fear of war. It was Russia always acting like they were a bunch of nuts and about to come apart at any second and might attack us. And of course, they had their own view of us over here. That's not even the point. Do you hear that the struggle, not armed, not active, but notice what a struggle it was. And I'm not being, again, metaphysical. When I say a struggle, look at your paycheck. You've been paying for it. Your parents were paying taxes to arm. And it's not political, but it is real. It was a struggle. But what was it over? Now, ordinarily, it sounds pretty simple. That's why I said don't miss the subtleness of it. Because you can say, well, the sons of bitches did say that they were our sworn enemy. I remember that old fat guy with a wart saying, we will bury you. Or even Lenin, who, of course, could afford to have his warts removed. Well, that was back in a more genteel time, if there ever was such in Russia. But even he said, that history, or maybe it was Marx, sue me, that history was on their side, that communism or real socialism would march through and triumph over greedy capitalists and all that. And so you could say, well, they were our sworn enemies. And so we had to prepare. We had to pay taxes. I had to work harder. My father, in fact, he died, I think, at an early age, as far as I'm concerned, from an ulcer because he had to work 2 jobs. He was trying to give us a decent post-World War II, Eisenhower-era life, and he tried to buy a nice Rambler, and he wanted to put me in through college. And he had to work an extra job. Now that I look at it, now that you bring it up, he had to work harder because there was so much of a tax bite taken out just to arm us, just to keep us prepared for those dirty Russians, from those dirty chocolate ice cream cones. And here we are, the decent vanilla folks. But note it, don't choke on that. What I'm trying to get you to see, it is more and more, it can all operate simultaneously, and it's still in the process of doing this. But I said it's a shift that ordinary intelligence cannot perceive. Life does not need for anyone to perceive it yet. If anyone's really interested, I can smell little pieces of it about to come out verbally in life. But men are no longer, to relative degrees, it is no longer a matter of fighting over acts. Or if you need to really slip up and be kindergarten, it's no longer limited to acts. Let me put it that way. Do you hear me? It's still, all time zones are still extant in everyone's nervous system. That is, the 3 dimensions still exist in the 6 dimensions. They don't go anywhere. So it's in you. It's not just history, but what I started to say, surely you can hear this. Let's jump back to our good old friend. I hate to pick on him, but Attila. And what he represented, or Genghis Khan, those kind of guys. If we jumped in now and I said, I say that I hear you're about to attack Rome. Yep. I guess it's their philosophy you don't care for. No. Attila wants, some strange women, wants some food. Plus he didn't want to have to, get a job. Why get a job or build up a civilization when, hey, there's one right there across the river. We'll go take that one over, we'll loot it, and we'll just let it all run down. They didn't have any, they weren't going to try to keep up their yards like a good Eisenhower 1950s good suburban neighborhood. They're not going to take care of the cars that they took from the Romans. They go in there, use it up, and they get tired, and Attila, that part of your nervous system, would then look around and, now Rome is in ruins. None of the cars work, the grass is everywhere, and all the women are worn out. They look as bad as the Huns women did. So what's Attila going to do? Is he going to start digging in facts? No. More acts. He starts saying, well, where can we go now? They're going to go somewhere else. All right, if you heard any of that, now right quick, we're running up. Jack it back to this time. And it's not that people do not fight individually, and as I admitted, even groups of people are fighting, but it's now not limited. That's what I was trying to insinuate. You could not have gotten, speaking of him as an archetype, you could not have gotten an Attila, or you could now, to say, well, wait a minute. Let me tell you how different the religion, there's some people called the Norse. They live up this other way from Rome. He goes, yeah. We're to go up there and get them instead of the Romans. And Attila's looking out there. Consider the lower part of your nervous system. You don't have to look for Attila, but Attila's staying there, looking over at Rome, seeing all those nice cars and those women that look a lot better, as some men say, than the one he's had all these years, and they're all fat and worn out. And he's saying, yeah. And you say, well, let's go up there at the Norse. You're about to attack them. Yeah, I was thinking about it. Well, the Norse. Yeah, well, why? Well, they're up this way. Well, you told me that, but why? Let me tell you the kind of gods they got. Let me tell you their religious beliefs. Do I have to push it much further? Attila is going to give you the back of his hand if you're lucky. Or you say, wait a minute, they have got, you won't believe this. I hate to tell you because you're going to be so upset when I tell you the kind of dreams and plans they have, the kind of society that they want to build up. When you hear this, you're going to be enraged. He only fights over acts. But nowadays, now back to it, it is now a matter as much. Well, see it any way you can, as much, or it's a gradual process, but now it is not just fighting over acts. That will not any longer do it. Men are now wrestling, not necessarily physically all the time, but they are wrestling over facts. The explanations of other people, that is the facts, their explanation as to their dreams, their ideas, the ways in which they're wired up. It is a most beautiful, efficient dynamo, a transformation station of moving energy, and groups now, and it's not, for one thing, it's more efficient that it's not killing off as many humans, which I'm not saying that's good or bad. Obviously, life does not need that as large carnage and warfare as much as it used to. And so now they fight not just over acts, but over facts. Not over what this other person or this other group did to you, but their explanations as to what they might do or what they want to do. And it doesn't have to be just frightening. It doesn't have to be, well, our idea is to hurt you. That's the easy way. That's a simple mind will say, well, that's all you're saying. Go back to mine North and South Dakota. The other people will be saying, we don't want to hurt you, we want to help you. And then they explain their dreams, which are different than yours, their hopes for the future. They offer their facts. And the facts are not the same as your facts. I'm not going to have any of that. Yeah, but they don't mean any harm, says an outsider. Somebody, I assume there's some people over there, still in Minnesota. People in North Dakota say, I don't like the sound of that. And the guy, in this objective clinical observer over in Minnesota, says, well, they're not threatening you. In fact, they're saying that they're welcome. They want you to join in, that they believe that their dream is good. The South Dakota dream. Why are you so upset? And he can't tell you. Because men do not make up facts. Their explanation will not explain anything. Well, why? Are they dumb? No. Are they human? Yeah. Men do not invent facts. Acts do. The facts follow the acts. The facts follow the needs. The explanations follow the needs. But it's now to the point that they are inseparable. Bye. Ciao. Adios. This is opening night, right?